In this episode, you'll discover what most online coaches get completely wrong about having authority to get clients.
The exact moment prospects decide you're the person to buy from, and why posting every week on social media isn't the answer.
And finally, how to become the obvious choice for prospects in your niche without a social media following.
Hello, my name is Anthony Uneri.
I'm Ty Gaucher.
And over the last 3 years, we've generated over $1 million with our coaching business. We help online coaches build authentic personal brands through 15-minute solo podcasts that allows them to attract dream clients into their business without posting on social media. What would you say is a massive misconception that we've noticed amongst our clients and we notice amongst online coaches who are trying to build authority?
Well, the biggest misconception is that people conflate having authority with being everywhere. So I think online coaches, so more specifically, online coaches think that to get clients, they need to be everywhere because that is what gives them authority.
And in this context, being everywhere really just means posting on social media, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, repurposing content, baby, showing up everywhere consistently. That's what you mean when you say be everywhere.
Yeah, and with the long-term goal of like getting to those big numbers, having the big 10K plus on Instagram, or like basically, let's just call it 10,000 followers plus on any of those platforms. I think that there's a belief there that when you get to those type of numbers, you have a certain level of authority about you. It's partly the authority that comes with that, partly also just the volume of people that follow you and see you that then just allows you to just make more sales. And that's the missing piece because there's just so many people you're visible to. But that's wrong. In fact, not only is it not true, I would say it is adding years of toil, stress, and just negative feelings that you don't want or need. And it's so unnecessary, specifically when the goal is just to bring more freedom into your life, to be able to basically shape your own schedule, to be able to have more breathing room and take your family on more holidays, etc. For that level of freedom and for that then income that matches that. And we say this obviously having coached and interviewed over 400 business owners to get this perspective. Trying to be everywhere online and build authority that way is just the wrong way of going about it. It's so ineffective for the goal.
What does being an authority actually mean?
So I'm glad you asked because we looked it up, got the actual definition.
So GPT.
Yep, so I'll read it to you now. Authority is a legitimate, recognized power or influence. So that's like just the broad definition for authority. But then attached to that, it's made up of two main ingredients. So two pieces. So number one is legitimacy. So that can be, credentials, a track record, like a certain job title, of course, can give you legitimacy.
Just like if you're like a doctor or something, is that what you mean?
Yeah, so like a doctor, obviously their job title would give them legitimacy.
Okay, so that's the first part. What's the second part?
So the second one is influence, which is the ability to influence people's behavior, change people's behavior, how people think or what they do. Only having both of those pieces, legitimacy and influence together, creates authority, because without one, it's not authority. So without influence, if you just have legitimacy, you only have perceived authority. But only when you exercise influence does that create actual authority. So to give you some examples, in a company, there could be someone on the board or someone very high up in the structure. And they could have legitimacy because of their job title. They're like someone on the board. I don't know the job titles, but just a board member. But no one listens to them. They're very shy. They're nervous. So no one really listens to them. They don't really get taken that seriously. They basically have no influence. So in that case, they don't really have authority. They just have perceived authority, but not actual authority. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. Yeah.
Whereas on the other hand, you could have someone that's just joined the team as like a temporary, as like a graduate job or like a work experience, like someone that's just like come in, they're basically at the bottom of the ladder and completely new. They might be really young as well. So on paper, they have no legitimacy, but they just spit bars. Or for the people in America listening, they just I don't know, drop sauce, we can say. And they have loads of ideas that are actually good. They speak in a really charismatic way, and when they talk, people listen basically. And even though they have no legitimacy on paper, their job title doesn't give them authority. They do influence people. They're in the habit of doing that, and so they have actual authority, even though they might not have perceived authority. So does that make sense in terms of why you can have one but not the other?
Yeah, it does make sense. So essentially what people actually want is to be able to have the ability to influence people to change their behavior, to change how they act.
Yeah.
That's actual real authority versus perceived authority is just having credentials and things that make you look like an authority, but again, there's a perception, it's not actual reality.
Yeah. It
So
doesn't
that's-
become practical until influence is exercised.
Got it. Perfect. Okay, cool. I'm with you.
Cool. Obviously, those are like pretty random examples in a like corporate board example. How would you say that applies in the online space? So what does perceived authority versus actual authority look like? Just like your first thoughts off the board.
Also, just like, has this person got a lot of followers?
Yeah.
They've
Yeah.
got 10K, 20K, 100,000 followers. They must be an authority.
Right. That's exactly what came to my mind as well. And I would imagine for most people listening right now, that is the thing. When we're posting online, trying to be everywhere, repurposing all the content, if you get a prospect, reach out, that's the aim. But also the wider aim of that is you expect that by doing that, your things will get more views, get more engagement, you'll build followers and you'll amass a following and therefore create authority for yourself that allows you to make more sales, right?
Correct. Yes.
And what we're here to say is no, that doesn't mean you have authority and just will make sales. That means you would create perceived authority, but you won't necessarily have actual authority unless you have the influence part as well.
100%. And the influence part is you have a following that you can influence, take action, and buy your stuff to become clients.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important because there are so many online coaches out there who have perceived authority. They've got a huge following online. They've got 10K, 20K, 100K followers. And then you ask them, okay, well, last month, how much money did you make from your LinkedIn following? And they're like, oh, didn't sign a client. Okay, well, what about the month before? Oh, one client. How much did that make you? $5,000. Interesting. And what about the month before? Oh, it was quiet. Sorry, I had a client. Where did that come from? A referral. You see?
Yeah.
So in the last
Yeah.
90 days, even though you've got 10K plus followers on LinkedIn or social media, but you only landed one client from LinkedIn in the last 90 days, and the other client you landed came from a referral. So again, you can have the perceived authority, loads of followers,
Yeah.
but that doesn't translate to actual sales for your business. And I think that's something that is weird, right? Because I feel like people intuitively know that, but they still fall for that trick. Whereas you can have someone who has, let's say, 1,000 followers on a social media platform, but they're making 10, 20, maybe even 30K per month because they have influence over their audience.
Yeah, and actually something in what you said there about, maybe the person who had 5,000 LinkedIn connections didn't get a client from LinkedIn, but they did get a client from a referral.
Yes.
Well, they still were an authority, but just not because of their social media following.
Correct.
They were the authority to the person that signed up with them via referral, because when the referral asked a friend, hey, do you know anyone that can help me with my anxiety or whatever it was? The referral then recommended their coach. The coach was then the obvious choice at that moment. And so they had the authority, even though like they might not have had the social media following or the wider perceived authority, they had the influence in that moment and that led to them getting a client. And when it really comes down to it, I think there's no clearer way of understanding what the actual authority versus perceived authority means than this, which is like, if you are struggling with anxiety, you want some help on it, you go to Google and type in how to reduce anxiety, and you see the first result on the first page of Google, which is obviously a website. In that moment, when you're looking, is the first result on the first page of Google an authority? And you clicked on it and the information was actually good and the website did actually seem credible, etc. Obviously, if you clicked on it and it was like a terrible website, that's different. On the assumption that all the pieces are in place, it's that website's opportunity to lose, right? Because in that moment of intent, they were the obvious choice when you went looking.
Got it. And when you say the moment of intent, what do you mean exactly?
You searching how to reduce anxiety, you had intention there to, well, basically find a solution.
So in that moment, you land on a page, it's on Google, you see the first one, you click it, that page in that moment is an authority because if, for example, it said, hey, do these breathing exercises, you would actually take action on the advice and therefore do the exercises. And because you were influenced by the website, they're an actual authority.
Absolutely.
Versus if the website looked a bit dodgy, they gave you like terrible examples, you didn't trust it, you didn't take action, they're not really an authority in that context, or are they an authority?
Well, they would have had the opportunity to be the authority, but blown their shot, right? Because they wouldn't have lived up to the expectations from being on page one of Google. They would have had the opportunity and then not taken it by basically having a bad website. But because they were the first option there, the most obvious choice, they had the power to be the authority, to create that influence, and it had nothing to do with their following, right? You wouldn't really go and check out the website on like Trustpilot before clicking on it.
Yeah.
You wouldn't go and look at like the founder's followers. You would just click the website, and again, as long as it's good, you would go with it, right?
100%.
And I think that proves the point, hopefully hammers down the point now that we've been building to here, which is authority in the sense of influencing people to buy or to take action does not come from being everywhere online. It comes from being the most obvious choice at the moment of intent.
I think we both came to this realization that you don't need to be everywhere and be online on social media, posting everywhere to be perceived as an authority in order to be an actual authority who is able to make and drive sales for your business. We stumbled upon the realization. It
was a happy accident.
You know, because I think, 6 years ago when we first got into entrepreneurship, making money online, the first business that we launched was a publishing business.
Yeah.
And it was during COVID. We did a bit of research and a mix of dumb luck and us being interested in podcasting. We decided to launch books on podcasting.
Yep.
With a bunch of research, a bunch of hard work. Anyways, we launched our book. First one, obviously, was an epic fail.
Yeah.
But the second one we launched was called Podcast Made Simple. And that book was basically helping online coaches, business owners, experts launch podcasts. And I remember around the time we didn't have an Instagram. We didn't have like a huge following on any platform, LinkedIn.
Yeah, we had no following
We were
at all.
basically invisible online.
We started a Facebook group around the same time because that's what people were doing back then, right?
Yeah.
And I think it had like 200 members by the time, like at best, by the time the books launched. didn't it?
Correct.
When there was other people, like competitors, basically, who had Facebook groups with like over 1,000 people in, plus the followings on Instagram and things to go with it. So to put into perspective, we were nobodies
We
in
were
terms of
literally
our
nobodies, yeah.
perceived authority online.
However, because the book that we launched ranked on page one of Amazon, it meant that when business owners were searching in how to start a podcast, we were the first person they saw. They
Yeah.
clicked on it, read the title, obviously liked the cover, and then bought the book. And that happened time and time and time and time and time again.
Like well over 10,000 times, right?
Well over 10,000 times. Like
And
40,000.
more, well, yeah, across the other
Like-
books a lot of times.
And eventually became a bestseller, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But they were buying the book from authors, me and you, who were basically...
Well, we didn't even use our real
naive.
name. We had a pen name, right?
had a pen name, yeah.
So Daniel Larson.
And the point being, they were buying the book, but we didn't have a following at all. We were invisible.
While we were invisible online, especially on social media, but making regular sales because at the moment when someone was looking for help, we were the obvious choice, right? Again, when people were looking for books on podcasting, which a lot of people were, we were the obvious choice.
100%.
And while that was happening, there were people with way more followings than us, or way bigger followings than us, not getting those opportunities and not making those sales. I'm not saying they weren't making sales at all, but like we were outlapping them at least in that regard.
100%. We were showing up in the moment when our prospects had the intent of solving their problem.
Yeah.
They were typing in how to start a podcast because they want a podcast for their business. They found our book.
And we were the obvious choice at that moment too.
100%.
And so I think the takeaway is not to launch books because I think everyone thinks if they launch a book, they're just going to build authority. Not true. Our book was on page one of Amazon because we did it with the purpose of being on page one of Amazon, not to get a following.
Correct.
So we had all the Amazon SEO dialed in and stuff like that, right? So only for that reason did our book work for us, whereas we know so many people that create a book, no one knows about it, no one knows them, and it doesn't help anything. So we're not saying to start a book to build your authority, but what we are saying is that authority doesn't come from being everywhere or necessarily having an online following or presence. That creates perceived authority, but the actual authority comes from the moments of influence, the moment where you are the obvious choice when someone has intent and someone is searching for a solution. And so for online coaches, if they're trying to build authority to make more sales by being everywhere, by generating a big presence, by generating more followers, that's backwards. That is like such a slog when you can just shortcut that. And I say shortcut because obviously that's what everyone's doing. So you can just take literally the short road by just finding a much quicker, more effective, more efficient, and probably more fun way to just show up when people are looking, be the obvious choice.
Interesting. So basically, you don't have to be everywhere posting on social media, posting everywhere. You just need to be found by people and prospects when they have the intent of solving their problem.
Yes, and doing so will, again, the phrase outlap comes to mind. Like you will leapfrog over the people who are doing it the other way.
Cool. So I mean, like, I think for us, we know that the way that we did it with the books was by ranking it on page 1 of Amazon.
Yeah.
And of course, if someone, let's say, for example, wants to be found by people who are searching on Google, that'll be SEO.
Yeah.
However, we know after interviewing and coaching 400 plus business owners and experts that there's almost like this hidden strategy and method that most online coaches who want to build an authentic personal brand are completely unaware of, as far as being able to market themselves in a way where they have one channel, and that one channel allows them to be found by prospects when they have the intent of solving the problem. For us and our clients, that's 15-minute solo podcasts.
Yep.
That rank on page 1 of Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That's an incredible way to be able to, again, be found by people searching on Apple and Spotify, how to reduce anxiety, how to grow a podcast, how to build my confidence, how to increase my self-worth. If you're an online coach who has a certain level of expertise, I think we both know that that's such an untapped opportunity for so many people, for so many online coaches to take advantage of. The reason why we say that most online coaches who have podcasts only have perceived authority, not actual authority, is because the way that most online coaches launch podcasts, they launch with a completely wrong format, which is an interview show, where inherently they are interviewing someone else who's an expert on their podcast, and the expert on their show is sharing their stories, their frameworks,
sharing their influence, their actual authority.
Sharing their actual influence and authority.
Yeah.
And not only are they being perceived as authority, in that scenario, they are the actual authority.
Yes.
So because the format that most online coaches follow inherently doesn't allow them to position themselves as authority to provide their value because they're interviewing someone else, they're not really influencing their audience. Their guests are influencing the audience. Whereas the way that we do it with our clients is they just record 15-minute solo podcasts, which means they're the person sharing their frameworks, sharing their expertise, providing value, and influencing their audience. The spotlight is on them. And that's why that works so well for actual authority, not perceived authority.
So it's like starting a podcast is perceived authority if you're interviewing other people.
Correct.
Starting a solo podcast, and a short one at that, that most 15-minute short one at that, which most people don't know about, creates actual authority because you as the host of the authority.
Correct. And that's when you're then able to drive more leads and sales from your podcast, rather than just having this thing that you're doing, putting out more content and adding more things to your already busy plate, but not driving real business results. And if there's enough actions that people are taking that isn't helping them reach their goals, you don't need to add another thing if you're not going to do it properly. So again, 15-minute solo podcast that ranks on page 1 of Apple and Spotify, crushes that.
And before we wrap up, why would that be a better option than writing a book or trying to land on page 1 of Google for the online coach who just wants a bit more freedom in their life without creating some monster of a business?
So I think the biggest thing is like competition, right? If you just start to launch a book, you're competing against 44 million other books on Amazon. That's a ton of books.
Yeah.
Versus if you start a 15-minute solo podcast that actually ranks on page 1 of Apple and Spotify, there's 400,000 other shows you're competing against.
Yeah, most of which are not solo shows either, which are the old way.
So look, if you are an online coach who wants to build an authentic personal brand without posting everywhere on social media, be sure to subscribe, go through our back catalog, and enjoy the channel.